In its most basic sense, refers to a state of vulnerability, delicacy, or weakness. It can apply to a broad range of things: individuals, societies, systems, or even inanimate objects. Fragility speaks to the inherent potential for something to break, fail, or collapse under certain conditions. The common perception of fragility tends to be negative, often linked to something that is easily damaged or destroyed. A fragile glass might shatter with a single blow. A fragile ecosystem might collapse under the weight of environmental changes. At its core, fragility represents a lack of resilience and inability to withstand significant stress or disruption. Fragility is not simply a weakness or a flaw. In many ways, it is a natural and inherent characteristic of life itself. Nothing in this world is truly invulnerable, and fragility highlights the limits and constraints that all things, be it people, systems, or structures, must contend with. For individuals, fragility can manifest in emotional vulnerability or physical frailty, often linked to old age, illness, or trauma. For societies or nations, fragility might refer to the delicate balance that holds them together, such as social cohesion, economic stability, or political integrity. These aspects are vulnerable to disruptions like economic crises, political instability, or natural disasters. But fragility can also be a source of strength. It is often through the acknowledgement of fragility that individuals, communities, and institutions learn to adapt, evolve, and build resilience. A fragile ecosystem, for example, may be particularly sensitive to changes, but this sensitivity can also drive efforts to preserve and protect it. In human relationships, emotional fragility may allow for deep connections and empathy, fostering understanding and support among individuals. In these cases, fragility does not mean weakness, but rather an openness to growth, learning, and transformation. The concept of fragility also extends to human existence in a broader philosophical and existential sense. Life itself is fragile, and our awareness of this fragility often shapes our choices, values, and actions. From a personal perspective, understanding that life is fragile can encourage mindfulness, appreciation for the present, and a focus on making meaningful contributions during our time. It can motivate individuals to pursue goals, cherish relationships, and live with intention, knowing that time is limited and fragile. In the context of social or political systems, fragility underscores the vulnerability of structures that may seem solid or enduring. Societies that appear strong on the surface may have underlying weaknesses, such as inequality, corruption, or social injustice, that, if left unaddressed, can lead to instability or collapse. The fragility of democracy, for example, is not only evident in the ease with which it can be undermined by external forces or internal divisions, but also in its dependence on the active engagement and trust of its citizens. In an increasingly interconnected world, fragility is no longer limited to isolated individuals or localized systems. It has become a global concern. Fragile global systems like supply chains, economic markets, and health systems can be impacted by crises such as pandemics, environmental catastrophes, or geopolitical tensions. These interconnected fragilities remind us of the need for global cooperation, foresight, and preparedness. In this sense, acknowledging fragility is not about despairing over what could go wrong, but about recognizing the impermanence and interdependence of the world around us and the need for sustainable solutions that honor this fragility. Fragility is not merely something to be feared or avoided, but something to be understood and embraced. It calls for humility, awareness, and a deep respect for the delicate balance of life, relationships, and systems. By recognizing fragility, we open the door to resilience, adaptability, and the potential for renewal, knowing that even in the face of vulnerability, there is the possibility of growth and transformation. Power is often defined as the ability or capacity to influence, control, or direct the actions of others. It is a fundamental aspect of human societies and has been the subject of extensive study in fields such as politics, sociology, economics, and psychology. While power can manifest in various forms, political, social, economic, or even personal, the underlying concept remains the same: the capacity to exert influence over others or the environment. At its most basic, power can be seen in terms of control and authority. A government, for instance, holds power over its citizens through laws, regulations, and the enforcement of these rules. Political power is typically vested in elected officials or institutions, and it allows them to make decisions that affect the lives of millions. This form of power is often institutionalized, operating within established frameworks like constitutions, legal systems, or military structures. The ability to enforce laws, collect taxes, or wage war illustrates how political power translates into tangible control over a population or territory. Power is not confined solely to formal institutions. Social power, for example, arises from the influence individuals or groups have over others in various settings. In a workplace, a manager has the power to assign tasks, make decisions regarding promotions, and even shape the culture of the organization. Similarly, in family dynamics, parental power plays a significant role in shaping the behavior and choices of children. Social power is often linked to status, expertise, and relationships, and it can be both visible and subtle. For instance, social media influencers wield a form of power by shaping public opinion, consumer behavior, and trends with their online presence. Economic power is another critical form of influence, often tied to the control of resources and wealth. Wealthy individuals, corporations, and nations exert power through their ability to control the means of production, dictate prices, and create employment opportunities. Economic power also extends to the ability to influence policies and decision-making, as those with financial resources can lobby for laws that benefit their interests. This form of power often creates significant disparities, as those with more wealth can have disproportionate influence over government decisions, media narratives, and global markets. On a more personal level, power can also be seen in the ability to make choices and exert control over one's own life. Personal power, or self-efficacy, is the belief in one's ability to influence events and outcomes. This form of power is vital for individual well-being, as it fosters a sense of autonomy, confidence, and agency. The more control a person has over their environment, the more empowered they feel, and this sense of personal power can lead to greater happiness, success, and fulfillment. Power can be both constructive and destructive. It can be used for good, to create positive change, promote justice, and help others. Leaders who use their power to champion human rights, fight inequality, and uplift marginalized communities are examples of power used for positive purposes. However, power can also be abused. History is full of examples where individuals or groups with power have used it to oppress, exploit, or manipulate others for personal gain or to maintain control. Tyrants, dictators, and corrupt systems exploit power for selfish purposes, causing harm to countless people in the process. Power is not static, it is relational and dynamic. It is constantly shifting and evolving depending on context, time, and the interplay of various forces. Power can be granted, taken, or relinquished. It can be shared or hoarded. It can be challenged and contested. The ability to wield power often depends on the support and cooperation of others, and when that support is lost, power can quickly dissipate. Power is a complex and multifaceted concept. It shapes every aspect of human life, from individual relationships to global politics. Its potential to both create and destroy means that power must be handled with responsibility, foresight, and humility. Understanding the nature of power allows us to recognize its impact, whether positive or negative, and take steps to use it in ways that promote fairness, justice, and the well-being of all. Fragility and strength are often viewed as opposing forces, with fragility being associated with weakness or vulnerability, and strength linked to resilience, durability, and power. However, these concepts are not always mutually exclusive. In fact, fragility and strength can coexist and even complement each other, shaping the resilience of individuals, systems, and societies in profound ways. At first glance, fragility might seem to be something to avoid. It is often equated with the ability to break or fail under pressure. Something fragile, like fine china or a delicate flower, can be easily damaged, and this vulnerability is often perceived negatively. Fragility suggests a lack of endurance, an inability to withstand the forces of change, pressure, or adversity. When we think of fragile individuals, we often think of those who are physically or emotionally fragile, susceptible to illness, harm, or emotional breakdown. Fragility is not always synonymous with inherent weakness. In many cases, fragility can lead to strength through adaptability. The very act of being fragile often requires the development of resilience, the capacity to adapt, recover, and learn from experiences of hardship or failure. Fragile systems or individuals may need to be more cautious or mindful of their limitations, but this awareness can foster greater adaptability. For example, fragile ecosystems, while vulnerable to disruption, can be incredibly resilient if managed properly, and their fragility can encourage efforts to protect and restore them. Similarly, people who have experienced fragility in their lives, be it physical or emotional, often develop deeper empathy, greater emotional intelligence, and stronger connections with others. Their fragility can be the catalyst for personal growth and the development of inner strength. Strength, in contrast, is typically associated with durability and the ability to withstand external pressures without breaking. Strength implies a sense of stability, the ability to remain intact, even in the face of adversity. In physical terms, strength can refer to the capacity to endure physically demanding tasks or to the robustness of structures and materials that resist damage or wear. In emotional or psychological terms, strength is the ability to face life's challenges with courage, fortitude, and resilience. A strong person is often seen as someone who can endure hardships without being overwhelmed, someone who can bounce back from difficulties and maintain their sense of purpose or identity. Strength itself can be a double-edged sword. While strength allows one to endure, it can also foster a false sense of invulnerability. A person or system that relies too heavily on their own strength may fail to recognize the importance of fragility and adaptability. This can lead to rigidity, stubbornness, and a reluctance to change in the face of new challenges. Just as strength can be a source of resilience, it can also breed arrogance and complacency. Strong individuals or systems might resist vulnerability, dismissing the importance of understanding their own fragility. This can lead to blind spots or missed opportunities for growth, especially when external forces change in unpredictable ways. The relationship between fragility and strength can be seen in the natural world, in human relationships, and in societal structures. For instance, in nature, some of the strongest species or ecosystems are those that embrace both fragility and strength. A forest may be fragile in its interconnectedness. Small changes in one part of the ecosystem can ripple through the entire system, but the forest's overall strength comes from its diversity, adaptability, and the mutual support between its various species. The strength of a community or society often comes from recognizing the fragility within it, acknowledging the vulnerabilities of marginalized groups, addressing inequalities, and finding ways to adapt and grow together. On a personal level, individuals who embrace both their fragility and their strength often demonstrate the greatest resilience. They are not afraid to confront their weaknesses, but they also know how to harness their inner strength in the face of adversity. By acknowledging their vulnerabilities, they become more adaptable, more open to learning, and more capable of navigating the challenges life throws their way. Fragility and strength are not opposing forces, but are instead interdependent. Fragility teaches us humility, awareness, and adaptability, while strength provides the resilience to endure and overcome. When we embrace both aspects of our nature, we create a more balanced, sustainable approach to life's challenges, one that values both the need for protection and the power of endurance. It is this dynamic interplay between fragility and strength that allows us to grow, adapt, and thrive in an ever-changing world. The interconnection between fragility and strength is a profound and often overlooked aspect of life. While they are commonly perceived as opposites, fragility, representing vulnerability and weakness, and strength symbolizing resilience and power, the reality is that these two forces are deeply intertwined and often rely on one another for balance and growth. Their relationship is not one of pure opposition, but rather one of coexistence and mutual influence, where fragility can enhance strength, and strength can, in turn, highlight and mitigate fragility. To understand this interconnection, it is essential to first consider that both fragility and strength are dynamic qualities. Fragility does not necessarily imply a permanent state of weakness. Instead, it often reveals areas that are sensitive to change or stress. In this light, fragility can be a powerful motivator for growth, as it brings awareness to the potential for harm or failure. The recognition of fragility can push individuals, systems, or societies to act in ways that fortify their vulnerabilities and prevent breakdowns. In a sense, fragility acts as a call to action, prompting reflection, adaptation, and ultimately the development of resilience. For example, a fragile system such as a small business may initially seem weak or at risk of failure in a competitive market. However, the awareness of this fragility compels the business owners to innovate, diversify, and invest in strategies that will strengthen the company. This process of addressing fragility can lead to increased stability even though the business was once vulnerable. Similarly, individuals who experience emotional fragility, such as after personal loss or trauma, may use that vulnerability to build inner strength. They may seek therapy, find new coping mechanisms, or build deeper connections with others. In this way, fragility becomes the foundation for greater emotional resilience and strength. Strength, too, has its own role in supporting fragility. In many cases, strength provides the foundation upon which fragility can be addressed. A strong individual or community is often better equipped to acknowledge and address its own vulnerabilities. Strength offers the resources and capacity to support fragility, creating a buffer or a safety net that allows fragility to exist without being completely overwhelming. For instance, a strong, supportive family unit can help an individual cope with emotional fragility, providing the love and stability needed to navigate difficult times. Likewise, a strong economy or government can offer protections and services that help mitigate the impacts of social or environmental fragility. Strength does not equate to invulnerability. In fact, it is precisely because strength is not absolute that it interacts with fragility in meaningful ways. Strength, when tempered with an awareness of fragility, is more sustainable and effective. For example, a powerful nation that does not recognize its environmental fragility through overexploitation of resources or disregard for climate change may find that its strength is short-lived. On the other hand, a nation that embraces both its power and its environmental vulnerabilities can adapt more effectively, shifting policies and practices to ensure long-term resilience. In this sense, strength becomes more meaningful and enduring when it acknowledges its fragility and prepares for the unforeseen. This interplay also extends to personal development. A person who is aware of their own fragility, whether it is a fear, a limitation, or a past trauma, can cultivate strength not by ignoring that vulnerability, but by addressing it directly. Personal growth often arises from confronting our fragility and finding the courage to work through it. Strength does not emerge from the denial of vulnerability, but from the acknowledgement and acceptance of it. People who have learned to balance both their strengths and their fragility tend to have greater emotional intelligence, deeper empathy, and a stronger sense of self. The relationship between fragility and strength is also visible in the natural world. Ecosystems, for example, are often fragile due to their complexity and interdependence. A slight disruption, whether through a change in climate, pollution, or invasive species, can send ripples through the system. Yet these fragile ecosystems are often incredibly strong in their capacity to adapt, recover, and restore balance. In a similar way, human societies and organizations that acknowledge their own fragility, whether through economic vulnerability, social inequity, or political instability, are better equipped to navigate change and build systems of support, ultimately strengthening their foundation. Fragility and strength are not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. Fragility can lead to strength by highlighting areas of vulnerability and motivating adaptation, while strength can provide the resources and capacity to address and mitigate fragility. Their interconnection is what allows individuals, communities, and systems to evolve, adapt, and grow in ways that are both sustainable and resilient. Embracing the relationship between fragility and strength is essential for creating balance in life, ensuring that vulnerability is not seen as a weakness, but as an opportunity for growth and transformation. Power is inherently relational, meaning it is defined and shaped by the interactions between individuals, groups, and systems. Unlike static or absolute concepts, power exists and is exercised within specific contexts, influenced by the relationships and dynamics in which it operates. This relational aspect of power underscores the idea that it is not something one can simply possess in isolation. Rather, it is something that is continuously negotiated, contested, and transformed through connections and exchanges. At its core, power is about influence, the ability to affect the behavior, thoughts, or actions of others. But this influence cannot be fully understood unless we consider the broader context in which it exists. Power is always in relation to someone or something else. For example, a leader's authority is defined by the people who follow them. A corporation's power is dependent on the markets, consumers, and competitors in its industry. In both cases, power is not inherent in the person or entity alone, but emerges from the dynamic between the power holder and those over whom power is exercised. Without these relationships, there is no meaningful power to speak of. One of the key characteristics of relational power is that it is often fluid and context dependent. The same individual or group may wield different types of power depending on the circumstances and their interactions with others. A political leader may have significant power within the government but little influence outside of it. Similarly, a wealthy person may have economic power but limited social or cultural influence. Power can shift from one individual or group to another depending on the nature of their relationships, the challenges at hand, and the circumstances in which they find themselves. This relational nature of power is evident in both personal and collective interactions. On a personal level, power can manifest in relationships between individuals. For example, the dynamics between a parent and a child, a boss and an employee, or a teacher and a student are all shaped by power. These relationships are not one-directional. Both parties exert influence over each other in different ways. The authority of a parent may be challenged or reinforced by the child's behavior, just as the influence of a boss may be mitigated by an employee's skills, knowledge, or resistance. Even in these seemingly hierarchical relationships, power is constantly being negotiated and balanced. In a broader social and political context, power is also relational in the sense that it is distributed across various groups and institutions. No individual, group, or nation is all-powerful on its own. Power in a society is often a result of the complex relationships between different social, economic, and political forces. For instance, governments, corporations, and social movements are in constant interaction, shaping policies, norms, and public opinion. A political leader's power may be constrained by the actions of opposing parties, interest groups, or the public. Similarly, economic power held by large corporations may be influenced by government regulations, consumer preferences, or even grassroots activism. This relational aspect of power highlights its capacity for change and transformation. Since power is not fixed and is always subject to the dynamics of relationships, it is fluid and can shift in response to changing contexts. A leader who once held considerable authority may lose power if they lose the support of key allies or fail to maintain strong relationships with constituents. Likewise, marginalized groups can gain power by forming alliances, mobilizing collective action, or shifting public discourse in ways that challenge existing power structures. The civil rights movements, feminist movements, and labor strikes throughout history are prime examples of how power can shift when relationships of influence are redefined. The relational nature of power also means that it is never entirely one-sided, even in situations of overt domination. Where one group may appear to hold all the power, there is still a reciprocal dynamic at play. Oppressed or subordinated groups may resist, negotiate, or adapt in ways that exert influence, even within systems of inequality. In these relationships, power is never fully absolute or unilateral, but always part of an ongoing process of interaction. The relational aspect of power reminds us that those who hold power are not immune to its effects. Power dynamics are shaped by the interactions of all parties involved, and even the most powerful individuals or entities are often constrained by external forces. A nation with military power may find its influence limited by global economic sanctions or diplomatic pressure. Similarly, a business that dominates a market may be subject to competition, consumer behavior, or changing legal regulations. In these cases, the power of the powerful is relational because it is not absolute but contingent on the complex web of relationships in which it is embedded. The concept of power as relational encourages us to view power not as a singular force, but as something constantly in flux, shaped by human interaction, context, and the interplay of different forces. Understanding power as relational helps us see the ways in which it is distributed, contested, and negotiated across all aspects of life. It encourages a deeper appreciation of the dynamics that shape our world, reminding us that power is something we can influence, challenge, and transform through our relationships and collective action. Embracing both the concepts of fragility and strength allows for a more holistic understanding of the world and our place within it. While these concepts are often seen as opposites, fragility associated with vulnerability and weakness, strength linked to resilience, and power recognizing their interconnectedness opens the door to a deeper and more nuanced approach to personal growth, relationships, and societal development. Embracing both fragility and strength is not about finding a middle ground, but rather acknowledging that they coexist, shape one another, and are essential for navigating the complexities of life. At an individual level, embracing both fragility and strength means accepting that no one is invulnerable. Every person has moments of fragility, whether emotional, physical, or psychological. These moments of vulnerability are not signs of weakness, but part of the human experience. Acknowledging our fragility allows us to be compassionate with ourselves, recognizing that it is okay to struggle, to feel uncertain, or to need help. It is through these experiences that we learn and grow. Fragility forces us to confront our limitations and seek ways to strengthen ourselves, whether through building emotional resilience, developing coping mechanisms, or seeking support from others. The process of facing fragility, when handled with openness and care, can lead to profound personal strength. On the other hand, embracing strength involves recognizing that we have the ability to endure, to rise above challenges, and to affect change. Strength is not just about physical or external power, but includes emotional and mental resilience, the ability to keep going when life gets tough, to persevere through adversity, and to learn from hardship. It is through embracing our own strength that we build confidence, cultivate a sense of self-efficacy, and develop the tools to address life's challenges. Strength is also found in our capacity to support others, to be a source of stability, and to contribute positively to our communities. However, strength must be tempered with the awareness of fragility. Without acknowledging the fragility in ourselves and others, strength can become inflexible, leading to burnout, arrogance, or an inability to adapt. In relationships, embracing both fragility and strength fosters deeper connections. Vulnerability is often the cornerstone of strong relationships. When we allow ourselves to be fragile in the presence of others, whether through sharing fears, insecurities, or challenges, we invite trust and understanding. Relationships built on mutual vulnerability are often more resilient because they are founded on authenticity and empathy. However, relationships also require strength, the strength to communicate honestly, to stand by others in times of difficulty, and to offer support when it is needed most. In this context, embracing both fragility and strength means recognizing that both partners may have moments of vulnerability, but also that both must possess the strength to navigate those moments together. In broader societal and organizational contexts, embracing both fragility and strength can lead to more sustainable and adaptable systems. Systems, whether social, economic, or political, are fragile in the sense that they are vulnerable to disruption, whether from economic shocks, environmental crises, or social movements. Acknowledging this fragility prompts proactive measures to build resilience. Strength in a society comes from its institutions, its social cohesion, and its capacity to address challenges collectively. A society that embraces both its fragility and its strength is more likely to be adaptable and responsive to change, creating systems of support, contingency planning, and community solidarity. Moreover, the idea of embracing both fragility and strength can lead to a more balanced approach to leadership. A leader who recognizes their own fragility is better equipped to empathize with others, to build teams based on mutual respect, and to adapt to new circumstances. On the other hand, a leader who embraces strength can inspire confidence, provide direction, and act decisively in moments of crisis. The most effective leaders do not shy away from acknowledging their vulnerabilities, but instead leverage both their fragility and their strength to lead with humility and resilience. On a global scale, nations that acknowledge their fragility, whether in terms of political systems, environmental health, or economic stability, are better prepared to face global challenges. Embracing fragility at the global level calls for cooperation, mutual respect, and the recognition that no nation is entirely self-sufficient or invulnerable. Strength, on the other hand, is found in collaboration and the ability to address challenges as a collective, pooling resources and knowledge to build a more sustainable and just world. Ultimately, embracing both fragility and strength is a call for balance and harmony. It is about recognizing that fragility is not a weakness, but a part of the dynamic nature of life. It is about understanding that strength is not infallibility, but resilience in the face of challenges. By embracing both, we can navigate the complexities of life with greater wisdom, compassion, and adaptability, cultivating a deeper sense of purpose, connection, and growth. Rather than seeing fragility and strength as opposites, we learn to appreciate them as complementary forces that together help us evolve, thrive, and contribute meaningfully to the world around us.